Hari Om. I've been asked to speak a little more and read some more of the life of Etty Hillesum. For life, although extraordinary, and the circumstances around her were of such that we'll not be able to fully comprehend, because in our day and age, hopefully by God's grace, such a thing will never come to pass again, as such a horrible life of imprisonment and brutal torture. But what she encountered, how she overcame, the depth of her suffering was only surpassed by the depth of her embrace with God. And so therefore, many have asked that this be dwelt into a little further so we can reflect upon it and possibly gain from her experience. So in the section, again, reading from the book, A Transformed Life, there is a chapter which deals with her inner life, how she attained the highest that we seek. To those around her, Etty brought comfort, warmth, and vitality. She was a luminous person in a bleak world. But what of her inner nature? What of her inner struggle to survive and stay sane amid such misery? To constantly be giving out to others is not sustainable without times of withdrawal and silence, retreat and solitude. We find that even though God's grace sustains us, we must withdraw within in order to be receptive to this divine hand. This is what Sri Ramana Maharshi spoke of when he says the grace is always flowing. It is our job to become receptive to it. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa said something very similar. He said, grace is always blowing in the wind. Our job is to unfurl our sail and catch the wind of grace. This is done by retreating within periodically in order to sustain the outward, benevolent, compassionate, and soulful nature. Etty did this in 3 ways. First, through her friendships. She tells how when the pressures became intolerable, she goes for walks with someone who is in need. She consoles others and she receives consolation from friends. Secondly, there is her love of nature. She appreciated that which was around her and the beauty of it, although the beauty was hard to find. But when she did come across something that gave her an indication of the beauty of God's creation, really in a sense it confounded her. One example of this is written in her diary thus. Today's real experience was the magnolia in the corner of the room, whose mysterious beauty almost scared me stiff. She had become so hardened in a sense by the horrible circumstances of the concentration camp. When she saw something that reflected the beauty of God, in a sense it scared her. So an amazing revelation. I stood open-mouthed for nearly 5 minutes, as if nailed to the floor. I couldn't believe there'd be so much beauty. I couldn't take it all in. I can hardly tear myself away from these flowers, stroking the leaves very gently with the tips of my fingers. And I pray to God. But thirdly, though she received consolation from friends and received comfort and some sustenance from even though the minuscule beauty that had been reduced because of the horror of everything that surrounded her, she said, thirdly and most importantly, that which gave her consolation, that which gave her sustenance, was her prayer life. And she says, it is extraordinary, very largely an outpouring of gratitude to God, even in the midst of such suffering. God is the source and name of the gift of life which still pulses through her and which she sees everywhere, even in the concentration camp. And she finds herself overwhelmed with gratitude to God. she said, "My life has become an uninterrupted dialogue with you, O Lord." One great dialogue. Sometimes when I stand in some corner of the camp, my feet planted on your earth, my eyes raised toward your heaven, tears sometimes run down my face, tears of deep emotion and gratitude. So we see that the soul of this tender woman who was thrown into horror of life, to a lesser degree, of course, we all experience difficulties in life. We overcome some we just become callous to and accept. But what comes from having that inner prayer life is the fact that even in the midst of difficulty and the most severe difficulty, we find gratitude because though all around us is horror and darkness, nonetheless we are standing on God's earth. We can gaze up into God's heaven, and we can, through prayer, communicate with the source of goodness and beauty. And then we can start to perceive in the midst of darkness the light that will illumine our heart and cause us to be gracious in the face of He who is the source of all grace and graciousness. So, this woman surpassed all. Many would say, what does it take to become a saint? I have been with many great saints, and they have told me, in God's eyes, saints are a small accomplishment. To have gratitude to God, to be able to respond to God's touch, surely that is saintliness. So it is really not a superhuman accomplishment. It is something within our grasp, if only we would ask for it. So this is why the Lord Jesus said, "Ask and you shall receive." But in the earlier section of the Holy Bible, in the Psalms, it said, "To know that I am God, and thus be gracious unto your own heart, you must first be still. To be still and know that I am God." So what is being asked for is to find a place of stillness, to still our mind. Again, though it seems like a broken record, meditation is the key. But meditation, along with certain aids and certain practices of life, which engender gratitude and cause us to be receptive not only to an inner embrace, but to perceive that which is around us and see beauty in the midst of what we might perceive as darkness. So may that light shine upon us all, and may we follow after this great soul, who by God's grace left us the diary of her words, and so many thousands and thousands who have gone before us and who will come after us, who sought grace through God and found peace within their soul. Adios.